Hey guys, what's going on? This is Xenox Gamer here, and today we got some League of Legends for you. What I want to talk about in this video is starting items. It's very important, and hopefully by the end of this you'll have a better understanding of what you should be buying and why. So there's a lot of starts you can do. So there's the common Dorn start, so you can do Dorn Shield, Blade, Ring, whatever you want to do. The problem with that is it gives you very low sustain depending on what item you go with as well. Doran's Ring gives you some mana and stuff like that. But in a lot of cases right now with how the game is, with how the meta is working, there's a lot of focus on exchanges, trading, and fighting a lot. It's not so much about a farm fest as it was in Season 2, or the earlier Season 2 and later Season 1. So you can always do the Doran's items if you like. They're not bad. They're actually, some of them are a really good buy, especially the shield if you're going in top lane or something like that, and they're very physical. They do a lot of physical damage, so someone like, let's say Riven. Dorn Shield actually be very good, gives you some health, gives you some armor, some regen, and then that unique passive is very well, especially for the defense tree. Then there's also the common Boots 3 pot start that's still very common with a lot of champions and a lot of players right now. Gives you some mobility, gives you some pots so you can sustain a little bit in lane. In Season 3, what they changed was base movement speed, so every champion, I think it was, got either 25 or 30 movement speed to reduce that Boots pot start, because it was a little bit too common because everyone was getting it, maybe except for supports or something like that, and it was kind of making the early game very stale. So that's very common. You can do that pretty much in any lane. You can do that as AD carry mid top, it doesn't really matter. That's fine if you don't really know what to buy, or you just kind of feel like the lane's going to be fairly even or something like that, and you're safe with boots, or you feel like you're going to be ganked a lot. The extra movement speed might come in handy. The other time you'd want to go boots, not so much for the sustain, but mainly to dodge skill shots or something like that, if you want to have that extra mobility, just so you can kind of run around your opponent a little bit more. And then you can also do Fairy Charm, Potions, Wards. There's a few combinations you can do, so I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but this is mainly for support, and you would go Fairy Charm, a couple HP pots, and then a few wards, but you can mix it up, and you can, if you have innate heal, something like Taric, Soraka, even Nami has it as well, and some other characters. If you have a heal and you don't need as many HP pots, you can go more wards, you can go more mana pots if you want to be a little bit more aggressive, if you want to spend that mana a little bit more. And depending on who you're going against or who's on the enemy team or anything like that, maybe an early pink ward might help as well. Excuse me. So for the junglers, we have pretty much two setups. So there's one which is the Hunter's Machete. This you can go Hunter's Machete 5 pots if you want, or a couple pots and a ward if you want to put a ward in the early jungle of the enemy or something like that, or ward your blue or red if you think you're going to get counter jungled. Most champions end up picking this up just for that extra damage to minions, because it helps that first clear, which is always the most important one. Some champions who already do a decent amount of damage might go Cloth Armor and 5 potions. This is also a common start for top laners against a heavy AD, so someone like Riven, Renekton, people that do a lot of physical damage up front, and you want to have that extra armor. So that's good as well. You can go either one of these in the jungle. You're getting that 5 potions, so you have a lot of sustain, but you also have that Hunter's Machete if you want to go that way as well, which is, from what I'm looking at, the more common route to go. And then now you also have this Crystalline Flask. Getting this thing early is very, very strong. If you are a champion that is going to be using mana, I wouldn't recommend it on people like Zed or Rumble or something like that, or anyone that doesn't use mana, even Riven, whoever, only because you're paying for something that you're only getting a portion of. You'd be paying for 40 mana over 10 seconds and having 3 charges of that when you're not even using it, so realistically, it's not that great. That being said, the longer you hold on to it, even if you are only using it for that 100 HP, that 100 health over 10 seconds, I mean, you get 3 charges of that, so even then, the math is probably still going to work out that it's going to be in your favor if you are taking a lot of damage and you do use that a lot. Most people will end up just waiting until they don't have any slots left to sell this so they can get the absolute best gold value out of it, and it is a little bit more sustained, even throughout the mid game. I've been seeing a lot of people keep this in their inventory for a long time because there's no reason to sell it until you absolutely have to. So this is very common for top and mid, especially, because you can go Crystalline Flask, you can do a combination of health pots if you want to do a mana pot and a ward. It gives you that early ward so that there's not very much pressure wherever you want it to be. So if you're top, it helps with those early ganks or anything like that. If you're mid, you can always put that by the enemy jungler's wraiths or something and see when they're transitioning to the upper or lower part of their jungle. It also provides you with a ridiculous amount of sustain, especially with HP pots. This recharges every time you go back to base. So every time you come to Fountain, it'll recharge for you. So you're only paying that 225 gold. The only problem is it has a very crappy resale value, which is I think 90 gold or something like that. But to be honest, it's more than worth it if you use it a few times. There's a few other starts you can do. I mean, like, you can always do a combination of things, like if you want to start Sapphire Crystal or some of the more expensive items in that 400 gold range, you can. A common one for 80 carries is Longsword 2 pots, and the reason being is because you're eventually going to be building this into a Vamp Scepter anyway, at some point in time in the game most likely, and some champions that have a lower range or are getting harassed a lot in lane are definitely going to want an early Vamp Scepter, so that just allows you to build into that without wasting something like Boots and 3 pots. You still have 2 pots of sustain, you'll be getting an early Vamp Scepter, so you won't hopefully have to buy as many potions, and you do have that extra 10 attack damage early on, which is very strong. Other than that, I mean, you can start like Amp Tome, things like that. There's also the Doran start, which I talked about a little bit earlier. The Ruby Crystal. A lot of these are in my opinion, quite inferior. The Longsword one's not too bad because you're in bottom lane. You have a support that most likely is either going to have a shield or a heal or something to help you out. So only having 2 potions isn't that bad. Right now, with how the game's kind of going, it's a lot of trades, it's a lot of fighting, it's a lot of going back and forth and seeing who can push who out of lane. So having that extra sustain, and that's why Crystalline Flask potions and ward and stuff like that is so popular, because it allows you to stay in lane forever. You can outlane your opponent, you can outlevel your opponent, and then when they have to go back because they went Boots Pots and you went Crystalline Flask, you can push another 2-3 waves and then go back and try and build up an advantage that way as well. The hardest thing about early builds or the starting items that you should buy is determining when you should buy them. An AD carry typically is always most likely going to get a BF sword because it is really probably one of the better items in the game, especially for AD carries. It gives you that sustained damage. It doesn't, now with how they changed the stacks, it doesn't hurt you as much when you die, and it is probably one of the better dueling items in the game. You're eventually going to be building a Vamp Scepter anyway, so this start is very common. You can also still start Boots Pots if you feel like you're going to be under a lot of pressure and you need that extra mobility, that's fine. I typically now start Longsword 2 pots because I feel okay with that. And you also have your support, which is probably going to end up starting Fairy Charm and a combination of whatever. Some supports, personally for me, I like starting Boots, Pot, and a Ward on Leona, because that gives me a ridiculous amount of movement speed, especially if you're using movement speed quints or something like that, which allows you to bridge that gap a lot easier. What that does, in Leona's case, just for an example, is when you E in and Q for your stun combo, you're actually able to outpace your opponent and get consecutive auto attacks in of damage, and then eventually you're able to land that second Q again. And it just helps to keep a lot of pressure in lane and a lot of off your AD carry. If you're pressuring them so hard that all they think about is having to run away, then you're doing a very good job and your AD carry is able to get some free damage out. So it depends on what lane you're going with. Now typically for top, if you are a mana user or even if you're not, the better part for me especially, what I feel like is Crystalline Potions Ward. If you do end up using mana and stuff like that, you can try Crystalline Flask on champions like Riven or something that don't use mana, but would probably still benefit a lot from this. The problem is she wants to build an early BF sword anyway, so she's going to be getting a Vamp Scepter, and that kind of helps her sustain a lot more than anything else, so you can kind of skip the Flask as well. Some champions, like if you're going against Riven or Renekton or someone that does a lot of heavy AD, someone that's a very big auto attacker, you're going to want to go that Cloth Armor. This allows you to build in a few different things. Warden's Mail, which is very good. You can get an Emblem of Valor, which goes into Aegis of the Legion, and then Ninja Tabby. So your cloth armor now is a lot better in terms of building second tier items, which is very good because it's not just sitting in your inventory for no reason. Randuin's is still very strong, and Frozen Heart, which are some of the two better armor items in the game. And Warden's Mail is definitely going to help you out, which now only builds out of the two cloth armor. So that's not going to sit in your inventory nearly as long as it would have in Season 2. And then there's also the boost potions start. Basically, most champions in mid and top are going to be going the Crystalline Flask potions ward way, only because of the amount of sustain it does give you. There's still some people that like going boots potions, which is completely fine. It's not saying one's better than the other, it's just in certain matchups. Like for instance, if I'm Cho and I decide to go cloth armor and a ridiculous amount of potions, I mean I have a bunch of gold, but I'd go cloth 5. I'll just make this a little bit better. I'm level 1 and I have 70 armor. Now I run a heavy armor page if I'm going top against certain opponents. So that is definitely going to help you out versus going something like boots potions or boots pots, which you wouldn't be getting that extra armor as well. So keep in mind who you're going against in your lane. What you feel is going to be best for you. If it's heavy AD, you're going to want that cloth 5 more likely, or Crystalline Flask. That just gives you a lot of sustain. You don't need the extra armor, maybe, but that extra sustain is very nice. If you don't really know, boots potions is still a safe way to go. You're going to end up buying boots at some point in time anyway, so it helps keep that build. The problem with starts like this cloth 5 is you're spending a lot of gold on potions which don't do anything for you other than the sustain, which is very important, but it's gold that's going into items that aren't actually providing any benefit later on in the game as far as items go. The more you can spend on items and less on potions and stuff like that, when you can negate damage in certain ways. For example, if you're Riven and you start shielding a lot of auto attacks or something like that to keep your HP high so you're not burning potions all the time, little things like that are definitely going to play a big role. They're going to start helping that advantage for you or get you back in the game if you're behind. So just keep in mind on who you're going against in your lane and what items you should be buying or what you think is going to be best for the situation. It's not saying that one certain path is 100% better than the others, but some are stronger in certain situations. So always just keep in mind what you should be buying, and that would hopefully start off your game. If you have a really bad early game, it's hard to have a better late game. So always making sure that your early game is as best as it can be is going to position you and your team in a better transition into mid game and late game, and hopefully winning the game. So that's all I want to talk about today in this video. I probably will be posting a little bit more. I think I'm going to be posting some BF3 footage later on, either maybe today or tomorrow. I've been playing a ridiculous amount of that game lately. It's really fun. But hopefully this helped you out, guys. Rate, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. I do answer all the comments, and I would appreciate it if you guys had any feedback or anything like that. As time goes by, hopefully these videos are going to be better, but anyway, hopefully this helped, and I'll see you guys in the next video.